Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are rediving deep into one of the most famous myths in American history, George Washington's wooden teeth. You've probably heard it a million times, seen it in cartoons, and it's become a piece of historical trivia that everyone just accepts as fact. But what if I told you it's a complete lie? George Washington never, ever had wooden teeth. So, where did this story come from, and what were his false teeth really made of? Let's find out. To understand the story of Washington's teeth, we first have to understand just how much he struggled with his dental health. It wasn't just an old age problem. His troubles started way back in his early 20s. He began losing his teeth one by one, and by the time he became the first president of the United States in 1789, he had only one single natural tooth left in his entire mouth. Imagine that. The leader of a new nation, constantly in the public eye, dealing with chronic pain and difficulty speaking and eating. Several factors contributed to this. The diet of the 18th century wasn't exactly rich in vitamins. Plus, some of the medical treatments of the day did more harm than good. For illnesses like smallpox, doctors often prescribe mercury-based medicines, which we now know can have devastating effects on teeth and gums. So, from a young age, Washington was fighting a losing battle against tooth decay and loss. This constant discomfort is actually visible in his famous portraits. We often see him with a very stern, tightly lipped expression. This wasn't necessarily because he was a grumpy guy. It was because his dentures were incredibly uncomfortable. They were bulky, ill-fitting, and caused his facial structure to look distorted. The constant pressure and pain meant he often had to use laudanum, which is an opium tincture, just to get some relief. His dental problems weren't just a minor inconvenience. They were a source of significant, lifelong suffering that literally shaped the way we see him today. So, if they weren't made of wood, what were they made of? The answer is a fascinating and somewhat gruesome look into 18th century dentistry. Washington owned at least 4 different sets of dentures throughout his life, each one custom-made by the leading dentists of his time, like Dr. John Greenwood. These dentures were complex contraptions, crafted from a bizarre mix of materials. The base was often made of lead or ivory carved from hippopotamus or elephant tusks. Then, individual teeth were set into the space. And where did these teeth come from? This is where it gets a little unsettling. They were a combination of animal teeth from cows, horses, and donkeys and, most disturbingly, human teeth. These human teeth were purchased from various sources. In the 18th century, it was common for poor people to sell their teeth for cash. Dentists would also buy teeth from other dentists or even extract them from corpses. This brings us to a very dark and often overlooked aspect of this story. Historical records, including a ledger from 1784, show that George Washington purchased teeth from enslaved individuals living on his Mount Vernon plantation. An entry specifically notes payment for 9 teeth from Negroes. While we can't be 100% certain these specific teeth ended up in his personal dentures, it highlights the brutal reality of the time. The exploitation of enslaved people extended to every facet of life, including their own bodies being used for the medical and personal needs of their owners. It is a sobering and ethically troubling part of this history that adds a layer of complexity to the image of the founding father. Now, let's circle back to the myth itself. If his teeth were made of ivory, metal, and other teeth, why does everyone think they were made of wood? The most likely explanation is simply a matter of appearance. The primary material for the denture plate was often hippopotamus ivory. Over time, ivory, just like our own teeth, can get stained. From frequent use in things like wine, tea, and food, the ivory would have developed cracks and turned a brownish, grainy color. To someone looking at them centuries later, or even back then, these stained, grained dentures could easily have been mistaken for being carved out of wood. The story of wooden teeth likely started as a bit of folklore in the 19th century, long after Washington's death. People were fascinated by the founding generation, and stories both true and false began to circulate and take on a life of their own. The wooden teeth tale was simple, memorable, and just quirky enough to stick. It's a classic example of how a misconception can become so widespread that it completely overshadows the truth. Thankfully, we don't have to rely on guesswork anymore. Modern science has stepped in to debunk this myth once and for all. Today, only one complete set of Washington's dentures is known to survive, and it's preserved at his home, Mount Vernon. Other partial sets and fragments are held in various museums. Researchers have been able to analyze these artifacts using X-rays and other advanced techniques. And what did they find? No traces of wood, not a single splinter. The analysis confirms they were made from lead, ivory, brass, gold, and both human and animal teeth eggs, as the historical records suggested. So, the next time you hear someone mention George Washington's wooden teeth, you can set the record straight. The real story is far more complex and, in many ways, more interesting. It's a story of personal struggle against chronic pain, a glimpse into the crude and inventive world of 18th century dentistry, and a stark reminder of the ethical compromises of the era. It shows us a side of a historical icon that is deeply human and flawed, revealing the man behind the monument. The myth is simple, but the truth tells us so much more. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this interesting, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like me to tackle next. See you in the next video.